Good morning, students. Today we will start a new topic, which is elements of cost. The elements that constitute the cost of manufacture are known as the elements of cost. A cost is composed of three elements. Such elements of cost is divided into three categories as below. Categories of cost are material cost, labor cost, and expenses. Now, how do you classify the cost? The classification of cost are again done as direct cost and the indirect cost. Direct cost are direct materials, direct labor, and direct expenses. Under indirect cost, it comes the indirect materials, indirect labor, and indirect expenses. The indirect cost, which is the indirect material, indirect labor, and indirect expenses, are also known as the overheads. Indirect expenses are again of factory overhead, then office and administration overheads, then selling and distribution overheads. Now, we are telling that these are direct and these are indirect. But what do you mean by direct cost and what do you mean by indirect cost? That one is an important part. We have known that they are direct material, they are indirect material, they are direct labor, direct indirect labor, then again direct expenses and indirect expenses. But what do you mean by them? So direct costs are those costs which can be easily identified from the product. By seeing the product or from the product, you can make out that these are the costs which are directly involved. So from the product, so the direct costs are those costs which can be conveniently or easily identified with the product. And now the indirect cost. What do you mean by indirect cost? Indirect costs are those costs which cannot be easily identified with the product. These costs are related to the cost of the manufacture or cost of the product, but these costs are not directly related. Now, these direct material, then direct labor and direct expenses, the examples which you will be understanding. Now, say for example, I have explained what you mean by direct cost and indirect cost separately. Now, also you have to know what are the direct material, direct labor and direct expenses. So these things also we have to, I will be explaining. But before that, you have to be clear with what you mean by direct and indirect. So again, I am repeating it. Direct costs are those costs which are directly related with the product and which can be easily identified or conveniently identified from the product. Indirect costs. Indirect costs are those costs which are related with the cost of the manufacture or product, but they cannot be easily or conveniently identified from the product.